tell us about adapting The Expanse for TV.
Well, the first thing we did is we put the book in the garbage can, all right, because that's really the problem we felt. No, it was actually a really interesting process because when I came on board the show, Sharon Hall, who's the head of Alcon Television, she said, so the book authors are going to be in the room with you guys on staff. And I was like, are you sure that's a good idea? Because you never know. I mean, sometimes authors get very precious with their materials. Sometimes, they're just unfamiliar with how you actually adapt something to long-form television. And so I was actually quite apprehensive. But when we came into the room, the guys, Ty and Daniel, who are collectively James S.A. Corey, who wrote the Expanse books, they were awesome, and they were incredibly aware of the different needs of television as opposed to a novel. They had written their novel. The first book, Leviathan Wakes, was actually what they refer to as a two-hander. Every chapter is like either Holden or Miller, the two lead characters' perspective, and it actually wouldn't have translated well as a way to actually do a show. And so they ended up, when Mark and Hawk were writing the pilot, they had already started to bring in characters and storylines from later books into the first book, and so that actually that was a good sign from the outset. And what ended up happening is, every time we needed to tease out details of the world or find another character or a storyline that could help us, sort of illustrate thematically what was going on in the show, they were always like, well, we could use this guy from book 5 or that girl from book 4 or this cultural thing in the belt from this. I'm like, fantastic. And we ended up pulling in the novellas that they had written, which were character studies of different characters, pulling that into the season, and they were terrific actually. And they ended up writing episode 7 of the show, and they're with us developing and in the room already again. So it's been actually a tremendous amount of fun. They've been great.
So this sounds like an incredible gamble on a television show. The expense, the scope of it, the stars. Do you sleep much?
Well, luckily it's not my money. It's been a long time since I've actually been back really in the world of science fiction. It's the last time I worked at Sci-Fi was on Farscape, which was quite a while ago. And it's rare when you get to do a show like this on television at all. Spaceships, zero gravity, space stations, asteroids, big battles at a very, very high level. Which was part of the attraction of it, honestly. It's like we're trying to do things that generally aren't done in series television. Alcon wanted to make these books into a series and do it the right way. Sci-Fi was a great partner in that, and they have been incredible in terms of how they've been pushing the show and what they want to do with it. They want to kind of come back to their roots, and they felt that this is something that you just don't see anywhere else. And so, in that sense, yeah, is it a gamble? But a good way to hedge a gamble like that is to give people something that they just simply don't get to see anywhere else.
Sorry, go ahead.
I realize you have to obviously, like you said, change it up from the books a bit to make a television series, but as far as the story goes, how true does it stay to the book's tales?
I'm a big fan in adaptations of being really true to the source material. It's like I never like it when people take something and they say they're adapting it, and the first thing they do is just toss all of the novel out. Because what you're doing when you do that is you're not really honoring what drew people to the material in the first place. And so, we have made, any number of changes to the way the characters kind of become who they are. We're staying quite true to a lot of the storyline, plot framework. Like I said, we're pulling in elements from subsequent books, from novellas, so it doesn't proceed exactly the same way. But it's a television show. It's not a book. It's a series where you want to see relationships, characters, storylines develop. One of the things that I told the guys the first day we kind of sat down in the room together was, I don't know if you've read the books at all, but the characters are kind of, they know each other actually pretty well at the very beginning of the novels. And I told Ty and Daniel, I was like, to me, if we can, by the end of 7 series, get to where you are in chapter 1 in terms of how these people relate to each other, that'll be great. So it's got a slightly different start, but very true to what is in the book spiritual.
So I know because of the Expanse Cafe that you have 3 major locations, at least those on the wall: Earth, Mars, and the colonies in the belt. How are you? Does most of these stuff happen in the belt, or do you guys kind of have sort of everything happening in all the places at once?
It's I guess the way to answer that is it expands as the show goes on. Predominantly, it's set in the belt, but it's set in Ceres Station, which is an asteroid station in the belt, and then in spaceships on the belt, and then in Earth, as well as on Martian spacecraft, etc. as the show goes on. So the idea is, I think, sort of similar to the way Game of Thrones kind of in its first season pulled you through the world. It expanded as you got further in. That's kind of the approach that we're taking. It's a big world. It's a dense world. It is, it has a tremendous amount of depth and thought and creation that's gone into it. It's a tough thing to throw all that at an audience like all at once. So we're trying to kind of ease people into it as much as possible. While but it's a big story and it's big in scope.
In the books, I know that there are physiological differences in humans based on where they're living. Is that going to be portrayed in the series? If so, what kind of challenges were there in getting that done?
It's a really good question, because it's one of the things that everybody asks, very very quickly whenever they hear about the adaptation. There are real technical issues with trying to render every single belter in every single scene as 7 foot tall and spindly, but beyond the technical issues, there was something else, is the notion that making every single belter 7 foot tall and spindly is effectively a purely racial identifier, and what we wanted to do is actually broaden the scope of the show beyond that, in the sense that one of the themes that runs throughout The Expanse is humans are tribal by nature and we factionalize. And when people start breaking up into groups that self-identify, the thing that always causes problems is when they can look at another group and say, you're not like us. And so what we wanted to do was broaden the scope of that beyond simple racial identification, which is what tall, skinny belters are, to cultural, language, socioeconomic elements, to bring class into it in a very strong way. And so our belters, some of them, you see really tall, skinny ones, but many of them look human-like. Where they're different is in their language, in their culture, in how they dress. What actually ties them together most strongly is class, is that they're sort of a servant class for other people. And hopefully by doing that, we've expanded a little bit beyond the scope of simple race as an element that defines the belters here.
Do you think it's time for a new space series? I mean, do you think everything that's going on in the television and even on the web series, it's time for a space?
Well, I would turn that question back to you. Do you think it's time for a space series?
Yeah.
I do.
Aliens.
Well, look, it is. Again, I think it's a great thing, and we're at a great time in television because there's so much interesting stuff out there. And anytime you can bring an audience something that they can't see somewhere else, that's terrific. And it's a great, deep, interesting world and a story that has a lot of scope and actually a lot of relevance to sort of the present day. We really are trying to ground it in these relatable elements of humanity at a precipice, at a point at which we are once again, having made it through, in our case, the atomic era, and now again it starts to feel like things are heating up again astonishingly between the United States and the former Soviet Union and Russia. It just feels like these things go in patterns, and that's one of the things that we're trying to bring through in The Expanse, is that no matter how far we get out into the world, no matter how far we get out into the system, until we figure out a way to get beyond these baser instincts and drives and selfishness, we're always going to have this problem if we stay human, and that's part of what goes on in the show.
And how far have you gone along with like the storyline? I mean, do you have a whole like timeline set out? I mean, do you have all these for the books? You're pulling from here and there.
Well, we have a great roadmap in the book, and like I said, we are really staying very true to the events in the book as they unfold. We're sort of like we're getting from A to B maybe a little bit differently or more circuitously than they do in the book, but that's sort of the natural thing. We shot 10 episodes of the show. We're in post-production, finishing them off. We started a season 2 writers' room, so we have that together, and we're actually already heading. We got a good bit of the way there. I can't really talk too much about that, but yeah, we're well underway. We're very excited, and everybody's diving back in. Our entire staff is basically back from season 1, and so we're rocking and rolling.
Thank you.
Thank you.